Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm happy to be here with you in the next 10 minutes or so to talk about an event that is happening already next week on March 13th. And it's an event that's so near and dear to my heart because I've gotten and got through that journey of managing and preventing burnout for so much in my career. So I'll talk about that event coming up shortly and how it could support you in your practice. I wanted to introduce myself first. My name is Hélène, or I have a bit of a French name with some lots of accents, so it's Hélène in French. And so I'm often introducing the LN as a quick technique to say my name in French. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. Please do insert in the chat any questions that might be coming up for you as we're going to talk about this event that we're delivering next week. I'm excited that it's a 4-day workshop. It's a full day workshop with 4 presenters. So there will be 4 healthcare professionals in total in this full day workshop on March the 13th. We're each going to present for 90 minutes. We're each going to deliver a unique aspect to support us in healthcare to prevent that burnout, make sure we're walking away from it, make sure that we're becoming aware that if some of us might be in it, what are some tools and resources that could help us to walk away from it? And if we feel we're on the verge of that burnout, what are tools and resources that could support us to walk away and stay away from that burnout? In my session, and each of us, I should add, are also going to be providing you with some tools and resources that you can start making some actionable, tangible steps right away. The way I've geared my content for me is really with those learning objectives so that we start understanding exactly what burnout is, being able to then identify strategies for ourselves that helps to build our resilience, what does work for us, and also to be able to bring that to the team. Because what we're seeing in the research is that burnout is a big impact that we're seeing is as a result of what's happening within organizations. And so, in that 90 minutes, trying to boost up our resilience for burnout prevention, but also trying to get to where a lot of the root is resonating from burnout and being able to address it there as in the organization, in our teams as well. And my hope is that some of these strategies, suggestions that are being presented feel doable because a lot of us will feel that I am just the one person, how do I make an impact if I'm not in a leadership role, if I'm not the director of an organization, a company, how can I make that impact that's within the system? So there are strategies that I find are hopeful and manageable and doable that I'll showcase in our time together. So I see a few questions popping up. So I'll go over some of these questions that are surfacing. And as I'm going through that, don't hesitate if anything is coming up on your end. Someone asked, what is if I could share a specific instance when a client that I was working with felt overwhelmed by burnout and how I helped them bounce back from it. Fantastic question. Thank you so much for posing that. So I work as an occupational therapist, and I've supported people in many areas such as concussion, persistent pain, very comorbid morbidities, diagnoses. And what my experience has been is that the awareness of burnout was not always necessarily there. Rarely do I have referrals that are coming in and they'll say, Helen, this is a diagnosis is burnout. Often what's happening is I'm working with the client, I'm starting to notice some of these symptoms, and then and I'm thinking a very specific client I had recently, and it's been by starting off by making an observation, by being for me, by knowing what are the symptoms of burnout. So we'll touch on that in more depth on the 13th in that 90-minute session. And so I find for me that's been really helpful because then it helps me to call it out. I've found from my experience, it's really I've yet to come across where people are in burnout and they know it, or they're ready to admit it, or they will talk about it. So I find that that's been a big role that I've played, is to call it out, make that observation. Then, if the client is a willing participant, we'll dive into that self-assessment of burnout. So of course I can't diagnose, but I know what the symptoms look like, so we can do a questionnaire. For me, what I like to do is not only focus on that self-assessment, focusing on their symptoms, but also I have a series of questions that focuses on the prevention side of it. So questions like, are you doing any 20-minute movement activities on a typical day? Do you have at least 20 minutes that your body is moving? So I'll ask that because we know that physical activity can be a prevention for burnout. I'll ask, do you do something fun that you enjoy on a weekly basis, or what's the frequency? Is it once a day? Is it once a month that you're doing something fun? Another burnout prevention strategy. And so I'll ask different questions. Another one that comes up is there's probably 30 questions or so. Another one is, do you have time to reflect? Even just that can give a lot of information. So when I'm working with a client, it's making that observation, starting to do that self-assessment, because the biggest piece is that awareness of where we are and where we want to be in terms of that burnout prevention. And once there's some clarity on what are the strategies, what do I have in my toolkit to build up in my resilience, then I get into my OT coaching hat. So I'm also a certified coach. So with burnout prevention, having those two really support me, because I can then go into under the iceberg and support them in those areas that they've identified that they'd want to dive into to prevent their own burnout. So we're getting into coaching dialogue. I'm their accountability partner. I help them come up with their own solution to sort out how they want to prevent burnout. They're leaving with action plans every session, and they're identifying small steps to build their resilience. So when I'm out of the picture, they are well equipped to continue stepping away from burnout, managing that burnout, and preventing that burnout. So great question. Thank you so much. I hope that helped to answer sort of like quickly and big picture how I can support a typical client. Another question that I see is surfacing is, oh, I love this. What daily practices or routine do you personally find effective for maintaining your own well-being? Great question. In the presentation, I'll actually go over 7 evidence-based strategies to prevent burnout. And it's really neat because many of them we are in control of, we can do, but there's some of them that we can trickle that into the workplace, which is really cool. I absolutely practice what I preach. And so there's one technique that for me has been most effective because it's really quick and it's a very strategic deep breathing technique, or I should say belly breathing specifically. And I'll leave you in suspense because I will go into detail of that strategy, exactly how to do that breathing technique that's super quick to do. And for me, I've just incorporated that now as a habit because it's so quick and it's right after my meal. So 3 times a day, I'm using that technique. And it's been very effective. And in the presentation, I go into the why to do it. Because for me, once I learned the why, it really helped me to use that technique. Another one that comes to mind, the strategically, so for me, my personal situation, we have a personal family situation that's happening where my mom has a long-term diagnosis. And I strategically, when we got the diagnosis last year, I strategically looked at those evidence-based strategies because I knew that burnout, it could be right there for me. And I decided to return to figure skating. I grew up figure skating, but I put it in the bag. I was done with figure skating, and I decided to go back to it as an adult. I had taken a 10-year hiatus, And I returned not because of the love of skating, not because I really wanted to, but because I knew it was one of those evidence-based strategies that it helps you to walk through the tunnel. And I know that won't make sense right now, but when you attend the presentation, it will. And so those have been, I think, the two key techniques that come up for me. One that's once a week with skating, and the other one that is on a regular basis. So great question. Thank you so much. I think we have time for a couple more. I see another question here. What is one small actionable step that healthcare professionals can take to prevent burnout and foster resilience? Fantastic question. The first thing that comes to mind for me with that one is that awareness. Because I feel if we relate back to that client example I gave earlier, I find that we can do that for ourselves as well. So really being aware of what are the stress and what are the stressors in our current situation. And for me, what really helped out is to separate the two. And so we'll do this more in the workshop in more detail, but the example that I just gave for my personal situation, that's a stressor. And we have stressors that are long-term, we have stressors that are short-term. That was an example of a long-term stressor. There's nothing I can do about that stressor. Some stressors, we can do our lists and we can do something about some of our stressors. This one in this example, we can't. But for me, what is hopeful is to separate the stressor and the stress. They are two different things that it's important to understand the theory and we can separate them. And it gives a hopeful message when we do. Because if we can understand our stressor and if we can become aware of how it stresses our body physiologically, then we're going to be more aware and we can start to identify strategies that will work. And so for me, my recipe for managing this current situation is very strategic because it's a long-term one. And so everyone will land with different recipes for their solution once they get clear on their stressor and on their stress, the physiological response to it. Because we can have a stressor, but we don't need to have the stress. We don't need to have that fight or flight sympathetic system activated all the time. So this is what I'm trying to manage in my situation. The stressors there is not going to go away, but I can manage this. I have control of this, which is really cool, or control to some extent. So thank you so much. Another great question. I hope that was helpful in my answer. And the last one, Love, says, why should you join on this event on March the 13th, which is a free event, which I absolutely love. And I'm so grateful for Pessy to reach out for this. As I said at the beginning, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I've watched so many people sort of like burn out or be on the verge of burnout in my professional life. And if there's some hope that I can give and strategies and tools that can help with individuals and organizations, this is really what I'm really passionate about. And I think the reason to join is because it's happening. When we look at the research, you're likely going to get affected either for you specifically or people around you. The studies are not improving when we're looking at it. There's a study that came out from McKinsey Health, and that one really hit me, where they looked at a survey with 16,000 people, and they found that 1 out of 4 of us, so if we look around right now, or if we think of our 3 closest people, and you include yourself, one of you is experiencing burnout or symptoms burnout. And there is something we can do about it if we are aware of it and if we know some of these tools. And the other statistics that is quite strong, and it's based in the States, and the statistic came out in just 2023, so it's very recent. We're looking at all across the board for all of healthcare, we're looking at 49.9% of healthcare professionals that are reporting burnout. That is a significant number. And of those 50%, this is why it's so important for those that are in the workplace and at an organizational level, because out of those 50, 28% of us, we want to leave the profession. And so, in my opinion, this is why you sign up, so that one, we can address the building up the resilience so that you don't get hit with that burnout. You have the tools, and if you do get hit with burnout, it will get better quicker. But also exploring the biggest piece, the reason for burnout is related to the workplace. So starting to explore what is it that we can do, even if it feels like a very small step, what would it look like? And for those that are in a leadership position, you have opportunities, and you can absolutely, every one of us that has a manager title has definite things that we can do to prevent burnout and support our team for preventing burnout. So that's why I hope you are able to join. Thank you for listening in. We will be live on March the 13th. Again, it's a free event, and great speakers, a list of speakers. We have 4 of us in total, 90 minutes each. Tools that you'll leave with, so you can make actionable changes right away for yourself or to bring that to your team. So thank you so much for listening, and enjoy the